Hey, look, it's Bring It In Troops, little Zoom from quarantine show with David Thorpe and NBA agent Todd Ramasar. Todd, how are you?
I'm doing great, Henry. How are you?
Good, good. Let me brag about you a little bit. You're the founder of the Life Sports Agency and agent to the likes of Baron Davis, Pascal Siakam, Josh Primo, Thomas Bryant, and one of David's favorite players, Kevon Looney. You've negotiated close to $500 million in deals. You've been a pioneer in doing business deals in new markets from China to the video game world. And you played basketball at UCLA with Baron Davis, Earl Watson, Jason Capono, and we are going to debate the pronunciation here. Is it Dan? It's like Gadzrich? Something like that. You say it.
Yeah.
What year was that, Todd?
That was 97 through 01. Dan, if we're talking about him and Jerome coming in, that was they were class of 98.
When did they win the championship when Cameron Dollar came in the championship game and y'all won?
That was 3 years prior to our class coming in. So that was 95. Our freshman class was 97, 98, or our freshman year.
I probably have never told you the story, but I'm sure I haven't told Henry either. But so if I remember correctly, he was the backup. Cameron Dollar was the backup. And your starter got hurt in the Final Four. And I was doing local radio. I wasn't well known nationally, but I was known locally because I coached a bunch of good players. And they asked me about the game, and everyone was picking UCLA to lose because they were missing a starting point guard. But I grew up in the Dollar family. I did 5-star and BC camp. And so I knew Cam through that. I knew Coach Dollar, his dad, very well, his older brother, Chad. I knew Cameron was unbelievable. Cameron played high school for a dear friend of mine, Kevin Sutton, his last year.
Yeah.
As a very well-known coach. And I knew Cameron was fantastic. And if I remember, they beat Arkansas, who played super fast. Okay. And I'm like, Cameron used to play in this way. So on radio locally, I said, I think UCLA's going to win because they're better with Cameron at point. And so it looked pretty good when they ended up winning.
Well, and you go back and look at that UCLA team and not taking anything away from Tyus because he was that floor general, but you had Ed O'Bannon, Charles O'Bannon, Toby Bailey, J.R. Henderson, Zedek was there. Like you had a talented roster of guys. So, it's no surprising Cameron just stepped right in and did what he was capable of doing, and the rest is history.
Yeah. UCLA's amazing.
So we started a new series, basically like David has all this knowledge in his head, and sometimes it's not like plain English for sports fans. And usually I'm trying to coach David out of like talking about whatever, weak side handoffs or whatever. But then we're like, no, let's just embrace it. We're calling it Coach Speak, and like, let's do that. Permission granted. This is a Coach Speak series. We're going to geek out. And particularly, Todd, because you're not like most agents, you take a tremendous interest hands-on with your eyes as a former player and expert in like assessing talent, and then David's favorite thing, developing talent. In that, I think Pascal is a very interesting case because he was not so well known and then became most improved and a max player, et cetera. So talk us through your mindset. Like, how do you identify someone like Pascal, and then what role do you play in his development?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with just watching film, or it's sometimes it's just catching a game that's on, a Saturday morning, afternoon, and just someone catches your eye. I'm sure David could attest to it. It. To be honest with you, it doesn't take long to see if a guy could play or not. And then once you could identify that he could play, it's just watching film on them. Then for me, once I watch film on them in whatever system that they're playing within, for me, it's also if I've reached out to that player and I have traction there at some point, is also seeing them in our gym to assess, really how good they are, because there's different levels to it. And then also, I always say where a player's at today is not where they're going to be at tomorrow. Depending on their age and their skill set. So if they're in the right environment and have a desire to, put in the work and love of the game, then, wherever they're at say 18 or 19 years old, they're going to be in a much different place down the road with further development. So that's in a nutshell how I assess talent.
When you first signed Siakam or Pascal, did you sign him thinking he was probably going to be a second-round pick? And whether you did or you didn't, the follow-up would be, when did you start realizing he might go in the first round? Like, walk me through that.
That's a great question, Dave. If I could go back in time A lot of times when I recruit players, it's not, are they a lottery pick first round or second rounder? Are they a 10 to 12 year NBA pro?
Yeah.
Period. Because how many stories do we have of guys, Gilbert Arenas, Michael Redd, Carlos Boozer, Chris Middleton, guys that are Jokic, guys that are second round picks that we know are pros once we see them in the gym. So, for one thing, it was Pascal was a pro. Once we got him in the gym, first day that he's in there, and we had some talent and talented guys in the gym getting ready for the draft in Pascal's draft class, as well as NBA pros that had just finished their season and were in the off season. I could tell you, Pascal first day in raised the bar in terms of the intensity and level of play. That's where I knew he was special, because it's rare for a guy to just step into a gym and just all of a sudden just raise the bar and level of play. And that wasn't just with his motor and intensity. That was just with his overall approach to the game. And then you started to see his footwork, the spin moves, the jump hooks, his soft touch around the rim and just floaters. That's where I was like, you know what? This guy is 6'10", runs the floor like this and is bouncy. And he's a two-way player. He has all the makings of what what your prototypical or your prototype for is in the NBA today. And that's where I knew he was likely going to be a first rounder if the right teams valued exactly what it was that I was seeing with him at that moment in time.
But I've been in this situation, Todd, and this is Coach Speak, so we can talk a little more about advanced than we otherwise would. The reality is there are some players are going to be drafted in a top something, 5, 10, 15. You have some guys you're hoping go bottom 5, bottom 7, or unlikely drafted. There's a big middle. So guys sometimes get drafted 24th. They easily could have slipped to 35th. All right. Mm-hmm. So going into the draft on draft night, did you feel confident that at least one team in those last 5 picks was going to take him? Or was it still 50-50? He might drop to the second round.
Yeah. So there was still a chance he dropped into the second round. Yeah. There was 2 teams that liked him. We know Raptors, who had 2 first-round picks, their lottery pick. They selected Jakob Poeltl.
Right.
And then they had the 27th pick. And then there was another team I won't name that were strongly considering Pascal. So it was more than likely that he was going to get picked in the second round, because I don't know this, David, if most people realize when they're watching the draft or they see a player's draft projection, say a player's draft projection is 20 to 30. I think the common fan or somebody that follows may say, oh, well, there's 10 teams that's going to draft that player. And it's not the case. There may be 4 teams that are draft, or maybe 5 teams, because when you really start digging into it, it's players fall in the draft, right, into that range that were maybe from the teams that were, say, interested in the player I'm representing, not thinking that a player that was rated higher on their draft board would be available. So that could push my client back in the draft. Or they just may have a need for a certain position, and that's what eliminates the other 5 teams. Or in some cases, teams just don't like the guy.
Right.
I always say it's, NBA teams draft players, not agents, right? So if I'm talking to Henry and David that are the GMs of 2 teams, and I'm having to convince you to take my guy, that's not the situation I want my guy to be in.
Right.
I want you guys to be in love with them. That's like me being a car salesman trying to convince you to buy this car when it's not something you like. Because if I do convince you and you drive off with that car, I guarantee you're going to have buyer's remorse and be right back in.
And not want to listen to you next time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or if you're certain owners in this league, you just go buy another car, and now that other car is left for God knows what. So, and that's not what I want. And I hate to use that analogy.
It's the truth, though.
Yeah, but that's the business. And for me, I like to look at the human side of things and really dig into the character of guys or how they approach the game, because if teams are paying attention, or talent evaluators or coaches and those that are looking at development, you have to look at all those aspects. You know what I mean? So, and then go from there.
How common is it for the agent, in this case you, to have the gym where those workouts are happening that you were describing earlier with Pascal working out with NBA players? Isn't it more commonly like someone like David would have that gym?
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I take a different approach. I guess not to give away too much, but everyone's unique. Every agent, like my style is, I want David to be an executive right next to me, because the development aspect is crucial in this business, because I could evaluate and assess and look at talent. But at the end of the day, David's on the floor with the player. If David is a coach I work with, and I may, as much as I'm in the gym, I'm not in the gym 5-6 days a week, or the full 2 hours that my guy may be on the court. So I'm constantly going back to David and asking those questions. How was the guy today? And David would say, man, he was really good, Todd. Like, look, this kid is even better than it was. Or after 2 weeks, like, Todd, he hit a wall. There's something there. There's a mental block. Or where we thought he was very focused, like he was faking it for the first 2 weeks, there's a drop off, right? We need some work. Or this guy may be limited, or you know what, this guy, I've thrown concepts at him and his ability to pick up things and grasp them quickly. No, this guy is special. Like, those are all the conversations I want to have with a coach that's in the gym. And that's why I'm meticulous about who's around my guys, is the attention to detail. That's where it all matters. I can't have my guys, repping out, having bad reps, if you know what I mean, whether that's their shot or their footwork or understanding certain concepts. That's not what I want. So again, it could be David's gym, or it could be a gym I've secured. But at the end of the day, whether it's a gym I secured, I make it to where it's the coach's gym. They're the authority in that gym. If I see something I don't like, I add it, or I make a comment in private.
Right. We're just I mean, there's a specialist aspect to this. I don't like doing pre-drafts anymore. It's the same grad school class teaching it over and over again for 20 years now for me, and it's gotten a little boring and dry. I do love the individual players. You fall in love with everyone you train, more or less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but it's the same. The game has changed a little bit. Obviously, we're teaching some things for the draft that I wouldn't have done. I would never have taught 10 years ago shot fake, side dribble threes. Now you can't not work on that, right? There are things, of course, that you always want to do. But I want to ask you this, Todd. I haven't heard agents talk about this very much. There was a period of time, Henry, where during the draft process, when you got after maybe pick 35, 37, where you weren't likely to get a guaranteed deal anymore in the second round, the agents would argue to their player, we're better, and to the media, we're better off not getting drafted so that we can pick which free agent deal we can sign and go to a team that might have a roster spot availability. And there is some truth to that. But I don't at all feel that's the case anymore, Todd, in my opinion, because between two-way players and Exhibit 10 contracts, I'd rather my player get drafted at 59 or 60 with no chance to make the regular varsity roster on day one, but he's still part of the group. And he's in that franchise. He does the media interview, whatever. But more importantly, they have ownership of him. As opposed, even if there's a stacked group of people ahead of him, he's doing the Exhibit 10 deal, which is just like a $50,000 deal in the G League if he stays the whole season, or a two-way deal, which is $400,000 if they last the season. But how do you see it as the agent actually negotiating those situations?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that I look at. Not to disagree with what you're saying.
You can if you want to. It's all right.
Yeah, no, but there's truth in what you're saying. But again, I may have mentioned this to you guys before. I think I try to think like a great coach thinks, which is I'm not married to this ideology. It's like I have to be nimble and change with the market or look at all factors to then put my client, who I know, in the best position possible. And here's what I mean. If pick 59 comes around and my guys is not getting drafted in 59, I won't single out any teams, but you know what? I will. And it's not a negative. Is if the Lakers or the Brooklyn Nets are drafting at 59, I don't want my guy there. And someone say, Todd, why not? They're going to win a championship, good culture, good luck. Yes, but when a team is constructed like that to win a championship, and they have to win a championship now, young guys get lost in the fray. That's just my opinion. And that's how I feel. And so I would not want my guy on a 1-year, 2-way contract, knowing that his minutes are going to mostly be spent in the G League. He's not going to get meaningful minutes on the NBA roster. So, and if he's not, he's expendable.
Yeah.
And
I don't, any deal they can do to win now, they're going to throw your guy in.
And I don't blame them.
Right.
The Golden States, the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nets, like they're in a win now mode. Why? Because Father Time is undefeated. Those guys, like young guys, they get better with time. Older guys, veteran guys, they're declining over time. It's just the nature of things. So they have to win now, and that's where all their resources are going. There's less of a development piece to that. There just is. I think, and I don't want to, all those teams I mentioned, I don't want to put in a box. I think the Lakers have done a good job with developing some of their guys in a win now mode, and some of the other teams have, but I don't necessarily, and again, that's me making a blanket statement. I would have to assess, see who it is. If it's a client I have like Eugene Omarui, that's 24, that's just this monster with this intensity and focus and discipline, okay, he might be all right in that circumstance because he's just an older, mature guy that can handle it and come in and physically be ready, mentally, emotionally, and be okay. But if it's somebody that I have that's younger, Josh Primo or a Justin Champagne that's 18 or 19, no, not likely. I like development to be very consistent and to have a runway so my guys could take off. If the runway is short, you're going to get a takeoff, but it's not going to have a good outcome.
But you're having these conversations though before the draft starts, because at 59 that team is calling you first, saying, "Hey Todd, we're going to draft him. The best we can offer is Exhibit 10, probably at 59, maybe a 2-way." Or in some cases, especially if it's an overseas player, we want him to stay overseas for a year or two. They're going to ask the agent's permission first if he's okay with that. Do you feel confident? Go ahead.
Well, David, I know it depends, right? If the team is trying to answer your question, if the team is trying to guarantee the player before the draft, okay, I might get a call and say, "Hey, we want to take your guy. We'll shut it down. You guys shut it down. We're going to take him." Right. And that's usually a conversation, maybe even weeks prior, because there's so many other teams that could take him before 59.
Right.
Most of the time, those calls are coming during the draft because the team can't commit because they don't know who else is going to be there at 59. In addition to the fact I can't commit because there could be a team even higher that could take my client ahead of 59.
But aren't they calling you like at 56, 57 saying, "Hey, Todd, we're going to draft so-and-so at 59. If he's still there, are you okay with that? Because he's going to be Exhibit 10 at best."
Correct. If it does depend. It could be me calling them or them calling me.
Right.
Yeah. But there's a conversation before the pick.
And you have to know your client's going to be okay with whatever the situation is.
Well, that's what they're turning to me as the agents. Like, "Hey, what's the opinion?" Because they don't know what they don't know.
No.
My guys are extremely intelligent, but they don't have the experience to know how front office dynamics, ownership changes, coaching changes. Certain coaches have a tendency to play veteran guys over young guys. And I'm looking at every single detail to say, okay, what's the likely outcome if my guy ends up with this team? What's their level of success? What is that coach's ability? Do I think the coach will like him based on the history of those coaches? Like I say, Doc Rivers loves point guards. Those are really, most of the young guys that he's played are point guards. Rajon Rondo, Shea Gilchrist, even Tyrese Maxey.
Tyrese Maxey, yeah.
That's just is what it is. That's data. Those are facts. That's not me having an opinion. I look at that. So unless my guy's a point guard, I don't know. I may look at that situation and say, is that the best situation possible for a client? And I say that with all the respect in the world.
Right.
To Doc. I just sent Shaq Harrison to Philadelphia as a veteran, that good motor, tough defender, because that's a good situation. But it again, it's all based on our tendencies, or that organization's tendencies for my guys to have the outcomes that I want. A lot of times it works out, other times it doesn't.
What were your emotions like when Pascal ended up on draft night with the Raptors? Did you feel good about that?
I was ecstatic. You know, here he is getting, again, looking at the non-basketball factors. It's a international city, only NBA international city.
Yeah.
Pascal's international locker room. Pascal's an international player with a president, a basketball ops that's from his continent, right? And you look at the culture of the Toronto Raptors at the time, DeMar DeRozan there, Kyle Lowry, they're winning 50 games a year. That is and Dwayne Casey was at the helm as head coach at the time. That was a situation where Alex McKechnie was there in terms of on the medical side. Like, that was an ideal situation in the first round where Pascal could get drafted to, adapt quickly, and not have the pressures of being their first round pick or lottery pick, because again, it was a little different with them having Jakob.
Yeah.
The tension was there. The microscope was there, not on Pascal. And it gave Pascal the opportunity to just come in and just work and do what he does best.
Alex McKechnie is a sort of an NBA legend almost. Like, can you just talk a little bit about why he's so revered?
You know, it's just Alex is, you know, everyone will attest to just, you know, just the work that he's done through the years, even before he was on the team side. I mean, my relationship with Alex goes back 20 years to Barron. When he had his facility in Vancouver, we would go up there, and Alex has been ahead of the curve. Like, people talk about sports science. I would say in the NBA, Alex has always been at the forefront of that before they even termed it sports science, you know what I mean, or load management. So, you know, and everywhere Alex goes, championships follow too. And you look at the data in terms of injuries or severity of injuries of the players, Alex is always behind the scenes. Like, if there was a Hall of Fame for individuals like Alex and what they do, and I don't even want to say Alex's title because I don't want to put him in a box, but he's just been phenomenal when it comes to players, just overall health and safety and injury prevention.
When years ago, when I was working 5-star camp back in the 90s, and all sorts of future NBA players were there, the head trainer was the head trainer from Creighton's basketball team. Mm-hmm. And very large man, and his nickname, I don't even remember his name this day. I'm sure I can think of it in a second. It's been 20 years, but he was called the Healer. Mm-hmm. And I never appreciated that when I was there. What I did appreciate, it's mostly an outdoor camp. If a guy went down, and there was lots of trainers who would volunteer to get hours from local college, whatever. If a player went down, they sprinted. And I've never forgotten that, because I don't see that enough. When I go to high school games, it drives me crazy. It's just a personal thing now. When I see you walk casually to a player writhing on the floor in pain, right. 5-star, it was a dead ass sprint to go help that young man.
Right.
But the Healer was all about healing. And that's the name of the game. Yeah. Like, that's what you do. That's why these guys like Alex and Arnie Kandor, they healed and they prevented injury, and that's the gold.
Well, and David, Henry, here's the other thing about Alex. Like, to be able to command the respect of these men that like to play through injury, some cases, or to shut them down and say, hey, you feel great right now, but I'm holding you back for another 2 weeks just to be sure. Like, that takes a different type of personality to be able to communicate to the guys, probably take some shit from them, and still be able to stand your ground and see it through. You know, Alex always wins in those situations, at least from my experience with him, but he's not doing it in terms of, his own power or his role within an organization. He's really doing it to the benefit of the player, which in result is a direct benefit to the team.
So Henry, that leads us to something. I'm sorry this is not on our very well scripted report for today, but Henry and I did a show this morning, and we talked to our colleague Gerard Hector, who was at the Nets training facility, waiting for Kyrie to report, and he was doing it via Zoom. And you may know the whole story. He has been vaccinated. There's a whole rigmarole. Rolling Stone, a big article on it, whatever. And so it just occurs to me, you just made such a brilliant point. Henry and I were talking with Sherrod about having KD. I was talking about Andrew Wiggins, maybe Steph Curry is able to sit down and say, we need you to do this so we can play all 82 games with you and not just half. But I wonder if the trainer, Kyrie's only been there a little bit. You don't have to tell us anything about your players, but what's your thoughts on the few players we've seen so far that aren't yet vaccinated? and the role maybe I call them healers, but the trainer can play in getting them to get it.
I mean, it's all about data. These are intelligent individuals that are very disciplined at their disciplined in terms of their bodies before the pandemic, right? Hiring chefs and eating the right meals and their vitamins and understand the levels of vitamin D in their body and how that, like, Kyrie's an intelligent guy, right? KD's an intelligent guy. So, what I would say is it's the trainer or the medical staff's ability to, one, be mindful and respectful of these men in terms of their level of intellect and their own readings or belief systems, and being able to convey this information in an intelligent way to that they understand it, and then be ready for their counter arguments. Because you can't force these men or individuals to do stuff, and you better be prepared for a healthy discussion, not an argument, but a discussion as to the why. Because I tell you guys, even for me, it's like everybody, it's their own right or prerogative to whether get vaccinated or not. I'm fully vaccinated. My family is, and we have our reasons, right, in terms of what we think is greater good, right, and even our own health. But if somebody is taking care of their health and their body holistically and, eating the right foods and extremely disciplined, and they say, you know what, Todd, I really don't believe in this. I believe in, the way things are in my own immune system fighting this like the common flu, and they don't have a history of doing the flu shots, then how can I argue that? Hey, I can have my difference of opinion, but hey, you're taking care of your health, you're disciplined about it, and hey, that's hard to argue. So again, for whether it's Kyrie or any of the other young men, it's, in some ways we have to support them or just figure it out, just figure out how it could work. But again, the NBA and these trainers and players, they're dealing with something greater than just the NBA and our rules and protocols or health and safety protocols. They're dealing with legislation.
Yeah.
Whether it's the cities they're playing in, or whether it's the countries they're playing in, that's a whole different ballgame.
There's a lot of starting, like, I guess we would often get on Troop TV draft candidates like the day before the draft, and they were finishing a long day, just like, be here, do this, show up, smile for the camera, like relentless days, which was kind of their welcome to the NBA. Wait, can you hear me okay? I'm getting a little bad Wi-Fi. Is that okay?
I can now.
Yeah. Okay.
So, there's this, the NBA can be very heavy-handed in how it passes down the rules and regs, right? Starting from the beginning. And so I feel like in this debate, and there's that good Rolling Stone article by Matt Thomas, talks about like players explaining a little bit why they're like, reticent. And it makes me think there's a difference between having authority, having the position to just cram it down people's throats. This is what you have to do on the one hand. And then what you're describing, which is a friend of the show, Steve Shenbaum. I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him. Okay. Steve gave me this phrase I think about all the time. He was like, tell the young people who work for you, earn the right to be heard, right? Totally different thing than having authority, right? Like, so to me, Alex McKechnie, Arnie Kander, David mentioned, there are people in their lives who have like, not like the position, the title, whatever, but actually just like have earned over time, like, this person's in my corner, this person has good advice, this person is worth listening to. I feel like those authority figures matter more right now in this immunization thing than the people who can make the rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes all the sense, Henry. I call that equity. I tell my guys, and even for myself, is like, if I'm approaching something or my guys coming into the NBA, even after a few years, is like, build equity, right? So that if somebody looks at your history or your track record, there's something to point to that's substantive, that they could say, okay, this guy is credible in what he's saying. I want to hear his voice or hear what he has to say. And I think that translates to all walks of life.
Totally.
Obviously this day and age has changed. I don't want to date myself or sound old, but like older, but with social media, in some cases, you get some people that don't have equity, that's voices are being heard. And in some ways that creates more chaos, because it's not based on data. It's not based on facts. It's very opinionated or unilateral in terms of what they're trying to say, opposed to in a case like an act of God or a pandemic, when you're trying to look out for everybody and everybody has a difference of opinion, there's an art to making sure your voice is heard and that everyone is, for the most part, moving in the same direction. And even if they're not, they understand or respect what the approach is or how we're moving in the right direction.
How do you see this playing out? How do you think this little particular debate about immunizations will play out over this season?
I don't know, Henry. I tell you, I'm learning as well. It's not, I try to look at things, guys, in a lot of ways. Playing sports is great because there's wins and losses, but I look at it as like a zero-sum game in terms of like something like this that's impacting society. It's not winners or losers. It's just, this is real life. This is health or someone's life on the line, or someone's mother, brother, father, sister, who you name it, child that's impacted by this in a way. So, as it relates to this, like the people that feel strongly about not getting vaccinated, I'm always going to listen and hear their perspective on things. I tell you guys, even going down that rabbit hole of maybe hearing some of the credible arguments, there was some interesting data I was hearing, which I won't say on this show, but it made me think like, wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting about the FDA and some of the things and the percentages of some of the chemically based, I guess you could say, medications or things that they approve and safety hazards in the future, for example. So for me, it's all about reading and listening to credible sources on both sides and then coming to a determination from there. But in terms of how this plays out, I don't know, guys.
I really like, Todd, I really like what you said. And I listened to a lot of talk shows on this, and no one said what you said, which is, as you and I both know this very well, these athletes are so disciplined. They're not perfect. I have a player that has pizza once a year, has ice cream once a year. He is an elite, played in the NBA, played in EuroLeague and everywhere. And he got the vaccine for lots of different reasons. But had he not, I would have understood. We had another former coach of mine named Ryan Pannone, who's going to be, I think, a big-time NBA coach one day, told a story about a player that I had helped that drinks olive oil. He is very much about building his own immunity. And so my main point is, if some of these guys don't want to take the vaccine because they got their own thing going on and they're never sick and they're incredibly healthy, I think we'd all be a little more understanding. The reality is that isn't the typical anti-vaxxer in America today.
Right.
They're not doing anything special, and you can just look at them and tell they're not professional athletes. And that's why we have lots of hospitalizations and deaths.
Right.
Because of it. So there is a nuance there. And that brings me to, we had a guest on our show way back at the start of the pandemic named Dr. Michael Mina. And if anyone on Twitter who follows Dr. Mina knows, he has been pounding the idea of rapid tests, not the PCR test, the quick rapid test. He's been doing this for, 17 months or something. And it occurred to me that last year in the bubble, I believe the NBA, those were not rapid tests typically. They did some rapid tests.
They used both, yeah.
They did both, right?
Yeah.
I don't see why they can't come up with a plan. You made a point about it being legislative. You'd have to deal with the legislature on this. Mm-hmm. But for people like Kyrie or Wiggins, where you're going to have to mask up and you're going to have to do a rapid test on game days, or you can't play. I feel like that might be a compromise we end up seeing if some of these guys are just digging their heels in, and their agents, like you, who speak well and have some power, you're going to speak up on behalf of your client.
I will. And David, we could have a whole show about this, because it's like, look, I'm not a medically trained doctor, so I'm relying on the same information or a scientist that studied this. I'm just reading the same information. Mm-hmm. Maybe the potential problem, I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree, is sometimes somebody could have COVID, and depending on when they contracted it, it's not showing up on the test. That's the other argument, right? A positive rapid test or PCR test may not show up until the next day, opposed to the day that the game is, right? In that scenario. So again, that's just what I've read potentially. Maybe there's an issue there. I don't know, but there's just a lot of different things that are going to have to be addressed or looked at, because again, you do it in sports, you got to do it everywhere else, right? And it kind of opens up Pandora's box as well in terms of employment.
Right. Henry, do we know, besides Kyrie and Wiggins, is there a third or fourth or a fifth yet? I imagine we might know by tomorrow because media day is today, of other players.
Well, they said the league said that they thought about 90% of the league is vaccinated. So there's going to be more, I would guess.
Yeah.
But
So
no, it wouldn't like.
Yeah. 5 or 6 more.
You, Pascal was one of the sort of more notable sufferers of COVID. I'm still reeling from 20 pounds. How sick you are to lose 20 pounds. What was that period like for you?
It was just checking up on him. I mean, by that point, it was, not to kind of undermine, how he was looking at it or even Pascal's own wellness, but it was almost a year after the pandemic broke out. So a lot more understanding about, what COVID is, how it impacts your body, the safety and health protocols and everything else. Had it been very early on, I think it would have been much different, a lot scarier, because we didn't know. Even the medical experts didn't know. So for him, it's just support, making sure that, when you go into quarantine, in some ways everything shuts down, because your chef that's coming in to prepare you meals and everything else, or family that's close by, it's like, and then just the stress of having it, it probably contributed to him losing 20 pounds, especially when you're talking about a guy that, has a high or fast metabolism.
Yeah.
So, and that was over an extended period of time until he was back on the court. But it's just providing support, making sure he's okay, checking in with the medical staff, and him getting tested. And that's pretty much it. You just wait it out until he's clear and he's passed all of his tests before being brought back to the court in practice and games.
How's he right now?
He's phenomenal. He is phenomenal.
He's not cleared though yet, is he, to play?
No, we just passed another milestone, but he's on the court. The only thing he's short of is contact.
Right.
But if you look at his body, his movements, and David, I know as a coach, if you saw him right now, you'd be like, Jesus.
It's
like,
cool.
Earl Watson's a close friend of mine, former teammate of mine at UCLA. He got brought on by the Raptors, and I'm ecstatic. Earl is there. Earl's been working with him quite a bit, and we have our conversations, and Earl's like, Todd, geez, I didn't realize he could do these things. Like, Pascal, I'm excited about this next year. And, and I say this to guys as it relates to development. David, you could probably attest to it. It's like, I think there was this old way of thinking of, a guy's 22, 23, he's old, he can't develop, or guy's 25, he can't get better. I think in this day and age, with just where medicine is, or these treatments and the way guys take care of their bodies and their discipline, and a guy like Pascal that has low mileage because he picked up the game later, his best basketball I still think is ahead of him. Like, people are like, oh, he's going to level out or plateau. Like, that's what I'm excited about, is this next level. He's 27 now. He's in the beginning of his prime.
Right.
I think he's going to have a great year this year when he's back from his injury, and then just going forward, he's gonna be great.
Which means what? Sorry. Yeah, what's the ceiling for him?
I think he could be an MVP.
Yeah.
If he puts his mind to it, he could be an MVP. Why? If somebody said, Todd, why? Well, he's already won a championship. You look at him statistically, even last year, when I think some people were being critical of him, his numbers were good. And I think when no one gives him enough credit in some ways, and I may be biased in this, is like his roster, aside from a pandemic, his roster has changed significantly in addition to his load in terms of workload in a very short period of time, right? You lose Kawhi, you lose Danny Green, Marc Gasol, then Serge Ibaka, then Kyle Lowry, right? And then you've had changes in your coaching staff, Finch and Phil Handy leaving, Patrick Mutombo. You've had a lot of turnover in an organization. So, and then a pandemic. So now that at least for me, like the roster and the team is stabilized, where once he had the veterans of say Kyle and DeMar or Kyle and Kawhi to learn from, it's him and Fred now. They're the vets leading Scotty Barnes and Delano Banton or Justin Champagnie and these young guys into the future. So I think there's just a lot more stability. And then look, Nate Bjorken coming back, great. Earl Watson being an addition, great. Nate Mitchell, great. Like their coaching staff with Nick Nurse there, who I appreciate his coaching style. I think, look, beginning early in the season, they're going to hit their bumps because of the young roster and just getting acclimated. But once they figure it out, I think those guys are going to be good going forward.
What do you mean about Nick Nurse's coaching style? Tell us more. I know I love him as a coach. I think he's their Greg Popovich, but give us your insight.
I just love guys, and maybe this is my own chip or my own guys that have worked from the bottom up. Like that's the grit, that's the love, like the pure love of the game. And for Nick, it's like, I love that he thinks outside the box. He doesn't think within a box. I think great coaches, challenge the status quo of coaching. Like Phil Jackson did it, the meditations and the Zen. And it's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But he was doing it even before he was winning.
Yeah.
It wasn't like something he bought into once he had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen or Kobe Shaq. That was something he brought to them and it worked. And someone say, well, God, look at all that talent. Like it was hard to lose. Yes, you need talent to win, but you also need, again, going back to what we were talking about with McKechnie, you're having some of the all-time greats that you have to coach and keep in line. That is not easy to do. That is a skill in itself, in addition to being coached, in addition to listening to a Tex Winter and guys like that. For Nick, it's his ability to just adapt and see things that otherwise I think maybe some other coaches wouldn't. Look, Nick, it started with Dwayne, and then with Nick, specific to Pascal, being able to say, okay, this guy was a 27th pick. We got him for his motor and his defense and maybe rebounding. We're going to start playing him at point forward. We're going to start putting the ball in his hands. We're not going to just have him out in the wing, flying like a bat out of hell, up and down the court. We're going to put the ball in his hand and have him initiate the offense or lead transition and kick it out and make plays. That's not something everyone would do. And then just seeing him in that, seeing him adapt to, again, first year to having Kawhi there, Danny leading that team to a championship, making adjustments on the fly, I think. And then even even last season, despite circumstances, doing his best, even with the change in his coaching staff and personnel, I just give guys credit like that.
Yeah.
And he's never complained once. He just, he loves what he does. He's passionate about it.
All right, Todd, I'm going to ask you a trivia question. Who is the youngest player in the NBA this year?
Oh, let me think. Josh Primo.
Tell us about Josh.
It was such a softball, dude.
Henry, you made up the rule. No pop quizzes. I'm honoring the rule. That was a loaded question.
You never know, Henry. That could be a trick. That could be a trick question. It could be this European late timing on some team that I was unaware of. But no, Josh Primo. Josh, in some ways, similar. Is similar to Pascal, just this unassuming person or player that I think for the people that know Josh or watched his progression and his play aren't surprised by this, but for the most part, because he was coming from Canada, because there's been a pandemic and he was so young and he reclassified up, people weren't so aware of him. And then now people are starting to see, exactly who he is. Obviously, he got drafted lottery to San Antonio. The Spurs knew who he was. They saw him in Basketball Without Borders in addition to some other teams. So there was already an established appreciation for who he was as a basketball player, but a greater appreciation now, I think, since they haven't gotten to know Josh, in terms of who he is as a person. And that's why he's a Spur. That's why they drafted him with their lottery pick. And That's a substantial investment, as you guys know, for a team that use, especially a team like the Spurs. They haven't been in the playoffs, recently. This is a team that's built on a championship pedigree. So for them to use that pick on Josh, that says a lot. But the one thing I love is like, for me, as I approach the business, I was talking to a team earlier today, is I'm better not bullshitting. It's like, I know what my client is. I recruit a certain type of player. I only recruit guys I love their game, because when I speak about them, I already know their character, their work ethic, their game. I'm not going to position or talk about one of my clients that's not an all-star max player and act like he is. I'm just not. But I'm going to talk about him in terms of the value that he does bring and be honest about it, because the reality is I'm in the gym 3 months in an off season watching him every day, where a team that may be signing him is just getting familiar with him. Right. So I could speak to those things that otherwise they can't see. And I could speak to a David Thorpe, if he's my player development coach, in the gym. And we're talking about it every day. We're seeing them play against high level pros or players to know what they're capable of. So with Josh, similar approach. I had NBA coaches around him, Earl Watson, before he was hired by the Raptors, John Lucas III, before he was hired by the Lakers. I had David Gale in there. And then some of my other coaches, Jared Cook, who's a head coach at a college here in Southern California. So when I'm talking to my guys and the consensus is Josh Primo's really, really good, in addition to me seeing it every day, how good he is, I could speak and articulate that to the Spurs in terms of what we're seeing and what he does. And then when they see him in a workout or at the combine and get to familiarize themselves with him, and then I could answer intelligently the questions they asked about, well, why didn't we see it at Alabama? Or why did he come off the bench and things like that? Well, he was young. He was buying into the system, right? He was helping his team win games, right? He was adapting. He was 17 at the time. You can't argue those things. Those are just facts again. And look, the college game is different than the pro game. You give a kid like Josh Primo spacing now in the NBA, yes, he has to get stronger. But with spacing, you could really see his ball handling ability, decision-making, making the right plays, creating his own shot, catching and shooting, leading a team in transition. And that's the beauty about his game. I call Josh is a unicorn. He's a unicorn.
I thought about Josh when I read about Manu Ginobili joining the coaching staff as a consultant.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
Right. And Manu, it's funny. It all made sense when I saw that too, David, because at the end of the day, Manu's been talking to a lot of the young guys. He's around the practices and the facilities. Tim Duncan is there. I love that, guys, about organizations.
Yeah.
When you the knowledge those guys have to be able to pass on to this generation of guys, those young guys, the way the Spurs, as you guys know, do their due diligence on players, that those young guys are going to listen because
they wouldn't be drafted otherwise.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's to their advantage.
Yeah, I think, and you can speak to this too. I had a player, you remember Kevin Martin, when he signed his first extension of his rookie deal, he asked me, I had been training him since he was a freshman in college. He had asked me to come to Sacramento for the press conference. I said, never is going to happen. It's not about me. Go enjoy with your agent, whatever. But I watched it and I didn't know what I knew was going to. I said, please don't mention me. I don't trust any coaches not to freak out, but they are giving you a BS extension. So that's the first one I might even allow you to mention that you work with someone. Otherwise, these coaches can get a little sensitive. What he said about me was he taught me how to be professional. And I didn't appreciate it as much then. I was happy that he mentioned me at all. I was very honored. But that is no small thing I've learned. And so when you say that, I mean, you're going to help Josh, but you're not a player on the court anymore. You're an old man. For him, more than twice his age. He's got Manu and Tim Duncan. Now, he'll watch the veterans, but I always tell people, you don't sign a veteran to work with the young guys. The veteran wants to play. He wants to keep earning a contract. Doesn't mean it doesn't help.
Right.
Guys like Tim and Manu, who have no dog in the fight at all anymore. They have zero playing time to gain or lose. Those guys can just say something to Josh as Josh. Did you notice that when you got done with practice today, you got on your phone, you went to get treatment room, but every veteran is back out there shooting? Like,
Right.
have you not thought about that? It's been for a week straight, Josh. That's going to happen, Todd. Like, these are the kind of conversations those veterans have that are done playing with young guys who think they're working hard, but the real committed players last a little bit longer every day on the court.
So David, to that point, 100%, and that's where the culture of a team is everything, right? Winning habits and losing habits are contagious. That's why I want my guys with good organizations, so they can learn through osmosis those winning habits of just being in that environment. But that's why I do what I do in the summertime. When I recruit players, they're a reflection of me. Why? Because when I have Pascal and Thomas Bryant and Kevon Looney and all these guys and Shaq Harrison or Paul Watson or whoever that have been through the system that I know are high character guys with a strong work ethic, my young guys coming in see that, hey, even in the off season, when you're away from your great organization, the veterans are going to pull you aside, Pascal, and say, what are you doing? Or that's great, give you a pat on the butt, or have you ever thought about this? And that's what I try to create from my agency or that environment in an off season. You're right, I'm the old guy. But I could live through my veteran young guys that are preaching to my young guys, so I don't sound like the agent that's always preaching, right? I don't want that either. And being respectful to my young guys, even Josh at 18, Josh is doing something that I've never done. So there's knowledge I could give, but I rather have that same knowledge come from a Pascal or a Thomas or a Kevon or some of my vets, or even a Rico Hines or Earl Watson, right? Than even from me. But the more they're hearing it, as long as I'm getting the outcome I want and it's registering, that's all that matters. It's not about my ego or the information having to come from me.
Right. Todd, you're very sober and even-handed and rational, but am I detecting a little bit of like, this Josh guy is pretty special? There's something special going on with Josh, right?
Yeah, that's why I said he's a unicorn. Yeah. You know, I've said it before. I'm just a big believer. I don't think people should ever be put in boxes in anything they do.
I agree.
If they're passionate, they love what they do, and they have a certain skill set that they work on, and they put the hours in when nobody's watching, like, support them, like, get behind them. That's me, like me for Josh. And it shouldn't have to look like somebody before him or others before him. Mm-hmm. You know, Josh's personality, he's a Spur. He's like, you know, look at Tim Duncan. Was Tim this outspoken leader that was yelling and screaming and no, he was just this consistent leader that led through actions, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, you get a pattern of being good, all of a sudden you're great, and that was Tim, right? And Josh, he's going to learn those ways too. I don't want to put that pressure on him, but when I see, you know, his God-given tools, the physical attributes, how he looks at the game from a cerebral standpoint in terms of his BBIQ, and just, you know, in a lot of ways, his tenacity, it doesn't come out like other guys or that competitiveness, but he's constantly trying to get in the gym. And one of Josh's greatest strengths that I've seen, he does not hang his head, which is rare for a young player.
Wow.
So
yeah,
you make a bad play, boom. You're not going to see him drop it. No, you won't even realize that. He won't even remember it in the next possession. He just goes back out there and he'll never make the same mistake twice. I've noticed that watching. It's like, whoa, okay, it's coming off that DHO or that high screen, and you know, what do guys do? They're dribbling too high, and you got a good point guard with long arms. They reach around and tap it out. They're going the other way. Okay, he's done that. Boom, it's turnover. The next time, and I saw it in summer league, it was just, guys, I tell you, I love the game. I forgot who it was, little tough defender. And he comes off and because of his length, he put the dribble out in front. So the guy reached, couldn't get it. The defender stepped up, tried to get it, and he put it out wide instead of back.
Wow. And
just like little adjustments that like that at 18 at his size, you know, with more repetition and again, his passion for the game, he's got a bright future. And like I said, he's with Chip England. His shot's going to get even tighter in terms of his mechanics and his reps, and he's going to get stronger, and Mother Nature is going to take its course. So he's got a bright future ahead.
And you think he can be a one? We've talked about it. You think he can be? He's a combo guard, because I love Devin Vassell. I think he's going to be a tremendous player, and that could be their backcourt in a couple of years.
David, honestly, and this is, and not me to like, he's a basketball player. If he keeps growing, you could play him as a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And his IQ is like, he'll embrace it, which I think is special to help you win games. Oh, you want to pop? You want me to play the 2? Okay, I'll play the 2.
Yeah.
You want me to score? I'll score. You want me to make the right passes in terms of dribble penetration and playmaking? I'll do that. Oh, you need me to play the 3 because we have 2 other guards and we need something more in transition. Oh, we're playing small ball. You need me to play the 4. Like, that's Josh.
Wow.
And he is very capable of playing the 1, but I love hoopers like that. Like he's a hooper.
Positionless basketball. That's what we're trying.
Yeah. He kind of reminded me in some way, I hate making comparisons, but I will. It's like the Joe Johnsons, the Brandon Roys. Could Joe Johnson play the 1 for you? Absolutely. At his size, 6'6", 6'7", right? Strong, that body type, but he could play the 2, 3, or 4. Brandon Roy, was he a 1? Was he a 2? Or was he a 3? I don't know. The guys were just very even keel and just got things done and won games. That's Josh.
We don't have a ton of time left, but Thomas Bryant was like explosive in the advanced stats and then got hurt. Is he back? Where are we?
Kind of a similar timeline as Pascal, even though it's a different injury with him coming back from an ACL. I would say Thomas will be back. Best case probably mid-November, right around there, early to mid-November. Worst case probably December 1. He is right on track, and the injury in a lot of ways is, I think, going to be a blessing in disguise, because what he's been able to do with his body biomechanically in rehabbing his ACL and addressing, because oftentimes, guys, and I don't want to be too long-winded about this, when players get injured, the attention goes to the injury and fixing it. Oh, he's going to Dr. Ilitraj or Dr. Alchek, and these are the best of the best in terms of ACL. Okay, it's fixed. He's good. He's doing his rehab. But no, most of the time, biomechanically, there was something that led to that kind of injury. So for Thomas, and again, it takes I think humility and just kind of sitting back and assessing everything to say, okay, if we're looking at all things and not immediately saying that it's a freak injury or it just happened, and really testing all of his movements, and then while having the surgery, while addressing the rehab of the ACL so that leg comes back even stronger, and not making sure it's not neglecting the other side of his body, right, for overcompensation and other things, that's where something special happens. So Dr. Andy Barr, who led Kevin Durant's Achilles rehabilitation, Paul George's ankle. He's one of the best. He's working with James Harden. He's worked with Pascal on his shoulder. He's one of the best of the best. He's been in charge of Thomas's rehab. So even talking to Thomas, I could hear it in his voice. Like he's eager to return and just get back on the floor, which he is now. Just hasn't been cleared for contact as well. But he's excited because he's able to do things even though he hasn't been cleared, that otherwise he wasn't able to do prior to the injury. Wow. That I think is going to help him vertically. It's going to help him get lower. If you guys know this with big men, oftentimes because of their growth spurts, they have tight hip flexors. So they bend at the waist opposed to getting down and bending their knees. And then, of course, restrictions in ankle mobility, things like that. All those things have been addressed. So, and in addition to the rest, when he comes back, he's going to be, I'm looking forward to seeing how he's going to contribute, because you're not going to get guys 6'10", 6'11", shooting over well into the 40s from 3, 40% from 3.
Todd, I'm excited about this. We are out of time. Maybe we can have you back a little later in the season, see how you guys are doing.
No, that'd be great, guys. I enjoyed myself. Good talk.
All right. Thank you. That's Todd Ramasar.